Again, just a huge thank you for those who've been assisting across the morning peak, from our frontline drivers and bus drivers and train drivers through to the mums and dads dropping kids off at school. We've had no major road reports in terms of trouble. We've obviously seen kids return today, 1.2 million kids moving across the transport network. Again, we've got everybody working together. So, obviously at these early stages, a thank you does need to go out. I know many office workers are deliberately avoiding the peak, so I want to thank them for that and continuing to work from home. We do have a little bit of a challenge though. It's sort of tradies hour between 6 and 7 in the morning, and there's a little bit of crowding happening during some of those early morning peak services. So if there's an ability for people to stay away from the network, particularly at those times, we'd welcome people doing that. But, this has got one aim, and that's to keep us all safe, minimise community transmission of this horrid virus. So that's the aim.
The main feedback today doesn't seem to be an issue with how it's working today, but why this wasn't in place 2 weeks ago when a lot of workers were returning. Why did it take this long?
Well, look, the data would suggest that, again, the numbers have been fairly stable right throughout the COVID crisis. We in New South Wales didn't cut a service. We kept our construction sites open throughout this crisis. So, the number of construction workers still travelling, particularly during peak times, has remained largely the same. In fact, over the last week, we've seen bus patronage drop by around 10% Friday to Friday last week. So, I think that the main thing is that we implemented this strategy at the right time, because we had schools going back today. We announced the strategy a week ago, which we deployed immediately. And then at the same time, we started to see an easing of restrictions. So, I think the timing's been right in terms of encouraging the fact that people shouldn't be travelling during peak, retime your day. Same time, we put measures in place across the network. These didn't just pop up overnight. We've put 400,000 stickers, green stickers, across the network. We've got additional cleaners, we've got additional marshals. We know that with schools going back, there'll be obviously office workers wanting to also return to their place of employment. And we're doing this constructively with people. So the data would suggest otherwise in terms of, whether this should have been too early or too late. It's actually pretty much spot on.
The buses, so the system there, it's going to be limited for most buses down to 12, but the message is also no school children will be refused. How does that actually work? If you've got 12 adults on there and the students turn up, do they all have to get off the bus?
Well, Tom, the main message there is common sense needs to apply. We have about 10% of school kids who actually travel on the broader transport network beyond the dedicated special school services. So that's roughly 100,000 kids. I'd expect to see about half of those numbers. We know, and that's why we've been urging parents to take responsibility, if they can, with taking their kids to the school gate, dropping them off and returning home. Again, we'll see what the data shows over the next couple of days. We do have, of course, our smartphone applications, our trip planning apps. There's nowhere in the country or around the world, from what I can see, where we've taken this innovative approach in terms of mixing our social media platforms with transport planning and the broader efforts we're putting in to make this as safe as possible. So, people can get loading data about their services from the day before, so they can plan their journey the next day. So we want to prioritise school kids. There's no doubt about that. I think most parents wouldn't want to see, little Jimmy and Jane left on the side of the road. And to that end, we just need a little bit of common sense to apply. And we are trying to very much keep that 1.5 metres between commuters, which is why we've got the green dots. Yeah.
So there are the green dots, and there are, I think, 100 marshals out there, and you want common sense to prevail. We know it doesn't always, realistically. With those 100 marshals, how many trips out there are covered? What percentage of train or bus trips are actually being monitored in any way?
Right, so we use the data on an hourly basis to work out where there are hotspots across the network. And what we're doing is, at this stage, we've got those teams, 20 teams at the 20 key interchange points on the network. We run some 46,000 services a day. So, you know, the point is that if you see a crowded service, it won't be long before you see another service arrive. We are trying to keep as much at a minimum in terms of people travel at this time, because we don't want to see a second wave of the infections, or we know that transport's that high-risk area where you do see crowding. The ability for the disease to spread is very real and very profound. So to that end, we're just trying to ensure that we apply that 1.5 metres. The marshals are there. We will continue to deploy more marshals as needed. We're giving the load data in real time through the trip planning apps to the commuters. And at the same time, we have the ability, if we need to close the gated stations or for buses to continue on their journey whilst they're still around those safe capacity levels. So a bit of common sense. It won't always work. It's not a black and white science in terms of how we're rolling out the network at this time. But, you know, I think, you know, the response over the past week, you know, people are heeding the messages. That's very positive, positive from the government perspective, because we want people to be safe. And, you know, this morning's peak hour, you know, on the face of it seems to have gone pretty well. So we've got a long way to go, but, you know, I want to thank everyone for their efforts so far.
We'll see how the afternoon goes. Our reporter said that the morning seemed to have gone pretty well, so we hope that continues to be the case. Just finally, your own future has taken some interesting twists and turns of late, of course. Before the Eden-Monaro consideration...
I want to give 2020 back, Tom.
I think a few of us do, Andrew, Constance. But I just want to clarify this. So before Eden-Monaro, you said you'd be leaving politics in 2023, before that consideration. Does that still stand now that you're back to state politics only?
Well, look, I've got the biggest job in the country at the moment. I mean, we're running the biggest transport network during COVID. I'm pretty focused on that. The community don't want to hear, you know, the soap opera around what I might or might not do in terms of my future career. What I would say, though, in terms of Eden-Monaro, it's going to be an incredibly tight race. You know, the research I've seen, you know, shows that. Fiona Cockvoice has been pre-selected over the weekend, and, you know, it's going to be a, you know, really, I think, a tight battle. The community has been through so much. But, you know, in terms of me, you know, look, I'm focused on the job at hand.
So 2023 is an open question now, rather than saying you'll walk away. You're now weighing things up again.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, I just want to get this job done at the moment. I made it clear. I mean, when you go through what I've been through this year at a personal level, naturally any human being's going to weigh up their priorities. But at this stage, you know, my efforts at being the best Transport Minister I can be as part of a great government, supporting the Premier. And I think, you know, if you look at what's going on in terms of COVID, that's why we're focused on that. I've got to be honest with you, Tom, I think the community have had it up to here in terms of politics, and, you know, at the moment, everyone's got to be focused on them in terms of the pandemic.